Welcome, dreamers, to the realm where time whispers its secrets beneath the hush of ancient winds. Tonight, we journey not to witness the glories of war nor the echoes of conquest, but to walk gently among the shadows of memory, where bronze once shimmered beneath a fading sun, and forgotten heroes walked paths lined with olive trees and cyclopean stones. In this quiet hour, let us drift toward the mysterious land of the Mycenaeans. Not as historians, but as dreamers. We do not come seeking dates and battles, but the warmth of lost fires, the scent of earth turned by ancient hands, and the soft murmur of myths long buried beneath layers of time. Before we embark on this journey through time's mysteries, if these ancient whispers resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle like, and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing to continue these nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow dreamers, from which corner of the world you're joining tonight's contemplation. Let the global community of history's mysteries connect across time zones as we drift together into the past. So now, with eyes gently closing and breath flowing like the tides of forgotten seas, let us wander into the veiled twilight of Bronze Age Greece. The road is long, the torch dim, but the stories still whisper. Let us begin. Beneath the rose-tinted sky of the Peloponnesian morning, where the mist drapes the hilltops like veils over sleeping gods, there stands a gate tensioned, monumental, unyielding. The Lion Gate of Mycenae, its relief carved in proud defiance, gazes silently upon the valley below. Two stone lions flank a column that no longer stands, guardians of a threshold between worlds. And beyond that gate, we step not only into a city but into a forgotten dream. The earth breathes here, the dust is laced with memory, each stone placed upon the other by calloused hands long turned to shadow. Mycenae, the name rolls gently on the tongue like the echo of a lyre string in a temple long abandoned, a citadel, a fortress, certainly, but also a sanctuary of mysteries. The air is dry, tinged with the resin of old pines and the sharp perfume of wild thyme. The path that winds toward the gate curves like a question, leading the pilgrim traveler not just upward, but inward into the hearts of those who built and believed. Before there was Athens, before the rise of Sparta, there was Mycenae, standing proud atop its limestone hill, gazing out across the argid plain like a king surveying his kingdom. Here, time folds inward. The stones underfoot murmur of Agamemnon, but their voices do not shout his name in certainty, for even the king behind the myths walks in misted memory. Archaeologists will tell us of tombs and treasures, of shaft graves brimming with golden masks and jeweled daggers, but what of the soul of the city? What of the quiet rhythm of its daily breath? Let us walk the path again, slowly, gently, with reverence. In the hush of dawn, the Lion Gate seems to hold its breath, its towering walls pressing not to frighten, but to enfold. Passing beneath, one enters another world, a world not just of stone and bronze, but of dreams layered in ochre and shadow. The central courtyard opens like a sigh. Sunlight filters through broken colors. The palace rises in tears, its upper halls once painted in colors now faded to memory. Walls adorned with frescoes, dolphins leaping in spirals that seem to echo the turning of time itself. The columns, tapered and fluted, once held painted cedar beams, the scent of which still lingers in the imagination, if not the air. Imagine now the sound of sandals against polished floors, the rustle of linen tunics, the distant hum of pottery wheels spinning in the lower workshops, a world not of silence, but of harmony. The hum of bees in the olive groves outside, the clink of bronze tools, the low chant of a priestess preparing an offering at the hearth. In the Megaron, the great hall of the palace once flickered a sacred flame. The hearth still sits at its center, as if waiting for fire's return. 4 grand columns surrounded it, lifting the roof skyward. The throne, perhaps Agamemnon's or perhaps a forgotten king's, was not a seat of tyranny, but of stewardship. Or so we dream. To the Mycenaeans, kings were more than rulers. They were conduits between man and God, between bronze and star. The world was not divided as ours is. It was layered, intertwined. Gods walked among men, and almonds fluttered on the wings of birds. To interpret the rustling of leaves or the path of lightning was not superstition, it was survival. Outside the palace, the walls continue in silence. Cyclopean, they are called. So massive were the stones that later Greeks believed only giants could have moved them. The myths speak of the Cyclopes, one-eyed builders with strength beyond reason. But perhaps the truth is simpler and more profound. Perhaps it was patience. Perhaps it was the will of a people who knew their place in the eternal turning of the cosmos. Near the gate, the grave circle waits in somber grace, a ring of tombs dug deep into the earth, guarded now not by priests or gods, but by time. Here lay the honored dead. Here once gleamed a mask of gold delicate, human eternal. Was it the face of Agamemnon? Or another hero, long unnamed? Does it matter? For in that golden visage, eyes closed, lips at rest, we glimpse not one man but the echo of all who loved and lost and believed. The Mycenaeans did not bury their dead in silence. They entombed them with stories, with weapons and ornaments, with cups still scented by ancient wine. They believed the soul did not end. It journeyed. And so too must we journey, from this citadel of memory deeper into the mists of their world. Imagine now the hills beyond the city, terraced with olive trees. Shepherds guide flocks across dry ridges. Children carry water from the spring. At dusk, the fires of the hearth are lit. A mother hums a tune older than writing. A father watches the stars. The Mycenaean script, known now as Linear B, has been deciphered. It lists inventories and tallies. Jars of oil, measures of grain, offerings to Poseidon, but it does not speak of dreams. It does not preserve the whisper of a daughter to her mother, or the quiet ache of longing in the night. That is our task, to listen for what cannot be written. To the south of the city, down the ancient road that once led to Tyrants in the sea, traders returned with goods from Egypt and Cyprus. Mycenae was no island. It pulsed with the lifeblood of a connected world. Lapis lazuli, cedarwood, ivory all passed through its gates, and with the goods came stories, songs, and perhaps even gods. Each amphora tells a tale, each broken shard, a sentence in a language of clay. We find them now buried in the earth, scattered like breadcrumbs. And we follow, at the base of the hill, the spring still flows, called Persea by the ancients, named for the hero Perseus, who was said to have founded the city. Myth wrapped around stone like ivy. But who was Perseus, truly? Was he a man or a symbol? A memory wrapped in poetry? As we leave the gate, let us not look back with sorrow, but with reverence. Its whispers continue, and in the stillness of our breath, in the hush between thoughts, it lives again. The sun sets now behind the hills. The lions above the gate glow red with the last light of day. They do not speak, they do not move, but they endure, just as the Mycenaeans endure in dreams, in ruins, in whispers. Let us follow those whispers deeper still. There are artifacts that shimmer with such silent weight that they seem less like objects and more like moments caught in amber. In the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, behind a veil of glass, rests such an artifact. A mask delicate, golden, serene, a face at peace, eyes gently shut as if dreaming. The world calls it the mask of Agamemnon, but gold does not speak. And perhaps this mask, radiant though it is, bears not the face of a king, but of another, unremembered, yet once loved, whoever he was. His features were pressed into this noble metal not to glorify, but to preserve, as though even in death, the Mycenaeans could not bear to lose the image of the departed. It is a portrait of silence. Imagine the moment it was laid gently upon the face of the deceased. A father, a warrior, perhaps a priest, the burial chamber flickering with oil lamps, the soft weeping of those left behind, the scent of myrrh in the air, then the weight of gold, not as a crown, but as a farewell. The mask is not realistic, yet it breathes with life. Its eyelids are closed with purpose, its lips do not smile nor frown. It is beyond emotion, it is stillness eternal. In this face, we do not see a man, but the idea of man. The belief in memory, in continuity, in the sacredness of form. Scholars debate its origins, argue about the name Agamemnon. Some whisper it may not be his at all, but from a generation long before him. Others say it was placed too high in the shaft grave to belong to a true king. But the mask does not answer. It simply is, and that, in itself, is the mystery. The shaft graves of Grave Circle A, where the mask was uncovered, hold more than bones. They hold stories carved in gold, etched in obsidian, inlaid in faience and shell, jewelry adorned with spirals, leaves, and lotus blossoms, daggers with scenes of lions hunting in eternal pursuit, cups shaped like flowers, fragile and bright. These were not mere possessions. They were talismans, guardians for the journey beyond. For the Mycenaeans believed death was not an end. It was a void. The tomb was not a prison, but a vessel. Step into the shaft grave. Feel the closeness of the walls, the quiet, the cool breath of the earth. Around you, the offerings lie arranged in reverence. The mask gleams faintly in the lamplight, the last reflection of a soul passing through the veil. Outside, the wind rustles, the olive trees. The world continues. But within this circle, time stills. What did they believe, these Mycenaeans, about what lay beyond? There are no texts, no mythic epics preserved from their own voices. What we know comes later from the poets of Athens and Ionia. But perhaps the seeds of those stories were born here, in these tombs, in these gold-laden. Perhaps the journey to Hades was not born in fear, but in longing. There is a certain peace in this idea that in the Bronze Age, amidst the clang of weapons and the forging of empires, there also bloomed a quiet tenderness, a belief in the dignity of the dead, a desire to preserve the beauty of a face, even as time turned it to dust. The artisans who crafted the mask, were they slaves or free? Were they revered or invisible? Did they know the man whose likeness they shaped? Or did they work from memory or from faith? Their hands have long returned to the soil, but their craft endures. And what of Agamemnon? The name echoes like a distant drum beat. He of the Iliad, the king who led 1,000 ships to Troy, the man who sacrificed his daughter, who quarreled with Achilles, who returned home only to meet death at the hands of his wife. A story sung for millennia, but was he real? Archaeologists seek him in layers of stone and ash. They point to palaces and tholos, tombs, to Linear B tablets bearing names like Atreus and Menelaus. The lines between myth and memory blur beneath the weight of centuries. Perhaps that is as it should be, for the mask itself does not ask us to prove, only to witness. It invites us to wonder. It invites us to feel. Imagine now the craftsman, hunched over his bench, the gold sheet gleaming in the morning sun. He works with simple tools, wooden mallets, bone stuff. He shapes the metal over a wooden mold, pressing gently, deliberately. A line here, a crease there, a curve, a fold. The breath of life through fingertips. He is not sculpting a god, he is preserving a soul. And perhaps, just perhaps, he speaks softly to the mask as he works. A prayer, a blessing. He places the mask in the tomb, steps back, bows his head. The grave is sealed. The earth closes over the shaft like a final lullaby. And the mask sleeps. Centuries pass, the city falls, the fires die. The lions at the gate stand guard as the world forgets. Until one day, in the year 1876, the soil is opened again. Heinrich Schliemann stands at the edge of the shaft grave, brushing away centuries of silence. He believes he has found Agamemnon. He lifts the mask from the earth, holds it aloft to the Greek sun, and proclaims his triumph. But the mask does not belong to him. It belongs to time, to mystery, to dream. It remains in its case today. Eyes still closed, mouth still mute. It does not blink. It does not age. It waits, and in that waiting, it speaks more deeply than any poem, more hauntingly than any song. The mask is not merely a face of gold. It is the threshold between memory and myth, between what was and what still lingers. On the crest of a hill, where the wind carries the scent of time and crushed laurel, there once stood a palace that did not dominate the land but listened to it. It was not a palace of gleaming marble or towering spires. It was not a place of vanity. Rather, it was a sanctuary built in rhythm with the stone beneath it and the skies above. Its heart was the Megaron, a great hall with a circular hearth, where the fire once danced like a silent oracle, its smoke rising through a vent open to the sky. This was not simply architecture. It was breath. The palace of Mycenaeans. Not a single building, but a cluster of rooms, passageways, and courtyards, woven together like a labyrinth of thought. Its walls were coated in plaster, once painted with scenes of grace and color, blue-hued goddesses with flowing hair, lions chasing prey, spirals and rosettes repeating like the echo of a mantra. Though much has faded, the silence still carries color. Step slowly into the Megaron. Feel the space open around you. High wooden beams once lifted the ceiling, framing the open oculus above. The light that filtered through was never harsh. It moved. It changed. Morning brought gold. Noon brought white. Dusk offered embers. The hearth was not just for warmth. It was a compass, a portal, perhaps even a throne for the divine. The four pillars that surrounded the central fire were not merely supports. They were guardians of symmetry, of balance, of ritual. Around them, the king would sit. But he was not alone. He was surrounded by priests, scribes, artisans, voices of the city's soul, and always, above all, by the wind. For the palace was not sealed from nature. It breathed with it. The corridors allowed air to flow. The walls absorbed warmth by day and gave it back by night. Rainwater was channeled and stored with care. Light and shadow danced across thresholds like old companions. This was not a fortress. This was a conversation with the land. Outside the Megaron, the storerooms stretched long and deep. Rows of amphorae lined the walls, some still sealed when found centuries later. They held olive oil, wine, grain, offerings for the gods or trade for the sea. Each vessel marked with symbols. Scribes using Linear B to list, count, remember. Linear Ban, early script, rigid and practical, the writing of accountants and administrators. It lists the sacred oil for Poseidon, the hides for the armory, the women assigned to weaving. It tells us how Mycene functioned, but not how it felt. The language is dry, but the space it once filled was not. Beyond the storerooms, the palace opened into private chambers, rooms of rest and reflection. The floors were once inlaid with painted tiles. The walls bore echoes of song. The women of the palace or noble wives would have moved through these spaces in flowing linen, their hair perfumed with myrrh, their eyes tracing the patterns of frescoes that no longer speak. One such fresco showed three women standing together, their faces turned outward. Some call them goddesses, others mourners, or simply the daughters of They wear flounced skirts and open bodices adorned in delicate jewelry. Their gazes meet ours across time, solemn and serene. They are not afraid. They do not flinch. They witness. The palace was not eternal. In time, its stones would tumble, its rooms would grow cold, its treasures would be scattered or sealed away. And yet, the wind still moves through the ruins. The same wind that once fluttered the linen curtains, that stirred the coals in the hearth, that carried songs from the hills. It is said that the Mycenaean palaces were part of a network Mycenae, each linked not only by trade and war, but by belief. They shared gods, scripts, pottery styles, and perhaps they shared dreams. But among them, Mycenae stood tallest. Its walls were the thickest. Its kings claimed descent from Perseus, slayer of Medusa, an ancestor of Hercules, myth and masonry. And even so, the palace was not immune to silence. There came a time when the corridors no longer echoed with footsteps, the hearth dimmed, the storerooms emptied. Whether by war, fire, or time itself, the palace fell. The wind remained. Centuries passed. When Schliemann and others came with picks and spades, they disturbed not just soil, but slumber. They lifted walls and brushed dusts from thresholds, trying to reconstruct not a building, but a soul. What they found were fragments. Walls without roofs, paintings without faces, rooms without names. And yet, the spirit lingers. Even now, those who visit speak of a hush, a stillness that holds you as you step through the lion gate, climb the hill, and enter the shell of what once was. The wind greets you, the stones watch, and the Magarn waits. There is something profoundly human in the palace. It was not meant to last forever, but it was meant to matter. So let us sit for a moment beside the cold hearth. Let us close our eyes and listen to the fire that once burned, to the voices that once chanted, to the wind that still answers. The palace of Mycene does not need walls to speak. It only needs silence. Beneath the sun-warmed hills of the Arglid, the land gently bows toward the sea. It is not a dramatic shore, not cliffs that roar, but a coastline that breathes. Soft waves kiss the earth with a rhythm that echoes a forgotten lullaby. For the Mycenaeans, the sea was not merely water. It was a mirror, a path, a mystery. From Mycenae's heights, the sea lies to the east, a haze of shimmering blue beyond the olive groves and plains. It was to this sea that their thoughts turned, and through this sea that their reach extended. They were not an isolated people. They were weavers of a maritime web that stretched from Anatolia to Egypt, from Crete to Cyprus, and beyond. The Mycenaean ships, built of timber bound with rope and sinew, carried not only cargo but culture, vessels of wine, beads of amber and glass, wool dyed in the color of sunsets, but also stories, languages, gods. The sailors who pushed out from the harbors of Napoleon or the shadowy docks of Tyrants did not fear the deep. They knew its moods, they understood its seasons, they watched the winds and followed the stars. Perhaps, on moonless nights, they whispered prayers to Poseidon, lord of earthquakes and oceans, their voices swallowed by salt and shadow. Some say the Mycenaeans were warriors, first and foremost, but that is only part of the dream. They were also artisans, merchants, navigators. They followed the sea not with conquest in mind, but with offerings. They brought goods to trade, not just weapons to raise. From the ruins of Ugrit to the shores of Conon, Mycenaean pottery has been found, fragments of the hands left far from home. Some jars were simple, others bore painted dolphins, spirals, birds mid-flight, symbols not of power, but of grace. They wrapped their world in beauty. The sea connected them to the Minoans of Crete, whose influence courses through Mycenaean art like a hidden current. The Minoans, with their palaces at Knos, danced with bulls and painted their walls in colors the sea would envy. When the Mycenaeans came, they did not destroy this art, they absorbed it, reimagined it, continued the dance, though the music had changed. Trade was more than economy, it was communion. Each journey was a thread in a tapestry of relationships, alliances, and whispers. The Mycenaeans may have brought goods, but they also brought questions. Who are you? What do you believe? How do you bury your dead? How do you honor your gods? And in turn they listened. But the sea is never only generous. It gives, and it takes. The same ships that returned laden with gold and incense could vanish into storms. A merchant's son might stand at the dock and watch the horizon swallow his father's boat, never to return. The ocean's silence could be cruel. Sometimes, silence came not from waves, but from war. There are letters written in Cuneiform, found in the archives of the Hittites and the Egyptians, that speak of the Ahiawa, a name many scholars believe refers to the Archaeans, the Mycenaeans. These letters mention envoys, conflict, alliances. They speak of power moving across water like wind through sails. The sea, then, was also a battlefield. Ships became arrows, ports became wounds. In the late Bronze Age, the eastern Mediterranean convulsed. Cities fell, fires rose, empires cracked. The sea peoples appeared in Egyptian inscriptions, invaders without a homeland, crashing upon coastlines like waves. Some wonder if Mycenaeans were among them, displaced, desperate, seeking survival. But perhaps the sea did not destroy them. Perhaps it simply watched. As Mycenae faded, the sea remained. It is still there today. It still breathes. Waves still polish stones that once lay in the holds of Mycenaean ships. Salt still dries upon the lips of fishermen whose ancestors once offered libations at the prow of a vessel before departure. The gulls still cry. The stars still rise. And so we wonder, did they speak to the sea? Did they see it as God or mirror? Did they trust it more than the mountain? Did they tell stories of it at night to comfort children as storms curled around the walls? We do not know, but we can imagine. We can stand at the water's edge as they once did, sandals pressed into wet sand, and close our eyes. We can hear the waves and the gulls and the wind, and in that hush, we may hear more. We may hear the ghosts of oars cutting through glassy water. We may hear the creak of rope, the flap of sail, the murmur of a sailor's prayer. We may feel, just for a moment, the pulse of their world. The sea brought them life. The sea brought them silence, but it never brought them forgetfulness. Because tonight, as we drift gently into sleep, it brings them to us. In the quiet before dawn, when shadows are still long and the olive leaves barely stir, the Mycenaean world awoke to a presence unseen. The divine, to them, was not sealed in stone sanctuaries, nor locked behind gilded doors. The gods did not dwell in far-off heavens. They walked among the groves. They watched from hilltops. They listened from beneath the earth. To enter the spiritual world of the Mycenaeans is to let go of rigid forms. There were no grand columns like those that would rise later in Athens. No marble temples with pediments etched in narrative. What they had were places sacred by nature, not by structure. A cave hidden in a mountainside, a spring whose waters never ceased, a peak where clouds kissed the soil. These were the sanctuaries of Mycenaean faith. Their gods were not absent abstractions. They were near, immediate, breathing. The names we find etched in the syllables of Lineae tablets echo with familiarity. Poseidon, Zeus, Hera, Ares, Dionysus. But they are not yet the Olympians. They are raw, older, more elemental. Their edges have not yet been smoothed by poetry. They are forces of the world, not yet sculpted into marble men. Take Poseidon, for instance, not merely lord of the sea, but perhaps the highest god in the Mycenaean pantheon. He is invoked in offerings more than any other. Yet here, he may have ruled not just the ocean, but the trembling of the earth. Earthquakes, those deep groans of the world, were his breath. Offerings to him was simple: oil, grain, honey, perhaps a piece of cloth, carefully folded and laid upon a stone. There were goddesses too, some familiar, some lost. Potnia, the mistress, is named often, but her nature remains hidden in mist. Was she a goddess of animals, of harvest, of life itself? Perhaps she held all of these. Perhaps she was simply the earth, personified, given a name that none dared to speak without it. And then there were the small gods, local spirits, the tree in the field that bore fruit without fail, the stone by the road where travelers always left a pebble, the ancestor whose grave never grew weeds. The Mycenaeans lived in a world thick with presence. Every threshold was a boundary not only of space but of spirit. The hearth was sacred. The doorpost was watched. A sneeze might be an omen, a dream, a message. They had no singular holy book. Their religion was not codified, but woven into the daily rhythm of existence. A prayer whispered before planting, a libation poured before a journey, a child's name given in hope, in gratitude, in memory. In Mycenaean homes, small altars may have held figurines, clay images of women with uplifted arms, serpents coiled around them, or birds perched atop their heads. These were not idols in the sense of later theology. They were invitations, focus points for presence. The sacred was not distant, it was intimate. There were festivals, too, though we know them only through fragments. Lists of offerings, the mention of dancers, references to feasts, a community gathered under the moon, voices raised not in performance, but in devotion. At the edge of the palace grounds may have stood no need for grandeur. And yet, even here, we find mystery. In a chamber at Pylos, burned in the fire that consumed the palace, archaeologists uncovered a tablet listing a list of female workers assigned to the service of the gods. Some were priestesses, others may have been healers, singers. The divine had its keepers, its guardians. But where were the temples? Did they sing their prayers in caves, where the drip of water echoed like a heartbeat? Did they light fires at mountain peaks, the smoke rising toward the stars as if reuniting sky and earth? Some believe the tombs themselves were sacred spaces, that the dead were not gone, but present, that the ancestors listened, advised, watched. In this way, even grief was not separation, but transformation. The Mycenaean vision of the world was layered, not linear. Life and death, God and man, visible and invisible, these were not divided by walls, but by veils. Thin veils, always shifting. To walk through a Mycenaean village was to walk among gods. To light a fire was to call them, to speak a name was to invoke them. And yet, despite this closeness, there is no fear in their traces, no sermons of wrath, no images of torment. Their gods were powerful, yes, but also part of a balance. Offerings were made not to appease anger, but to maintain harmony, to affirm connection. Even the thunder was part of the song. So what remains of this sacred world? A broken figurine with open arms, a clay tablet with a list of honey jars, a tomb still sealed, its entrance guarded by stone lions and time, and within us a sense, a hush, a feeling that perhaps the divine was never meant to be distant, that perhaps holiness is found not in temples, but in breath, in earth, in memory. The gods of Mycene have faded, but the wind still moves through the groves, the fires still glow in dreams, and the veil, though delicate, has never truly closed. Beneath the glimmering surface of Mycenaean art and architecture, behind the shimmer of gold and the weight of stone, lies a quieter magic. It is not sung in epics or carved in grand relief. It is pressed into clay, in the sharp lines of a script both mundane and miraculous. A script called linear. It does not leap from the page like the myths of Homer. It does not echo with the voices of gods. It does not dazzle with poetry or prophecy. But it speaks nonetheless, whispering the workings of an ancient world through lists, ledgers, and offerings. Linear B is not a language of dreams, it is a language of order. And yet, in its order, there is something strangely profound. The tablets upon which Linear B was inscribed were never meant to last. Made of soft clay, they were simply a tool of administration, a method for scribes to keep track of livestock, grain, labor, and sacrifice. They were baked only accidentally, preserved by the very fires that consumed the palaces they once served. What survives is fragmentary, a broken archive of a world half seen. But even in that partial light, a vision emerges. We see the structure of the palace. We see the web of economy and belief. We see the names of gods Poseidon, Zeus, Hera. We see titles of officials, the quantities of flax, the rations given to workers. We see lists of men and women, not as legends, but as lives. There is beauty in that. Each tablet is a breath of bureaucracy, yes, but also a trace of humanity, a glimpse into a world that lived not only in myth, but in motion. Someone wrote these symbols. Someone pressed stylus to clay. Someone worried about shortages, tallied the oil, calculated the grain. Imagine the scribe, seated at a low table near the storerooms of the palace. Light spills through a nearby opening. He dips his stylus, checks the inventory, marks the symbols. His hand is steady, his eyes sharp. Around him amphery line the walls. The scent of oil and dust fills the air. He does not know that his record will last 3,000 years. He does not write for us. And yet, we are here. The script itself is an early form of Greek ancient, rigid. It lacks the fluidity of later alphabets, the rhythm of Attic verse, but it holds weight. Every sign, every wedge, every line was carved with care. A vocabulary of commerce, but also of continuity. The words are often repetitive. One tablet might read, 4 oxen for the feast of Poseidon, 7 jars of oil for the goddess of the grain, 3 women assigned to weaving, 1 girl, 2 boys. It is not poetry, and yet it is a song of daily life, of ritual, of order in a world touched by the divine. Through Linear B, we see that the Mycenaeans lived not only among warriors and kings, but among gods. The sacred was woven into the administrative. Offerings to Poseidon were tracked like wheat. Sacrifices were counted. Festivals were scheduled. They did not separate spirit from structure. The palace and the temple were one. Even the gods received rations. The script also tells us of hierarchy. The Wainax or king stood at the top. Below him, the Lawajatasta, leader of the people. Then the scribes, the artisans, the farmers, the herdsmen. A society built not only on conquest but coordination. There is no record of rebellion, only responsibility, only rhythm. And there is mystery, too. Some tablets include names we do not understand, places long lost, terms whose meanings have slipped through our grasp. Words like Karchi and Nakaroda, perhaps officials, perhaps rituals, perhaps something else entirely. Each unknown word is a door, half open, leading into shadow. And perhaps that is the magic of Linear B, not in what it reveals, but in what it suggests. It shows us a world that was ordered, yet fleeting, practical, yet sacred, rigid, yet alive. Linear B died with the palaces. When the fires came, when the walls fell, when the scribes vanished, so too did the script. For centuries its marks meant nothing, until the 20th century, when scholars like Michael Ventris and Alice Kober began to unravel its secrets. It was a puzzle, a code, a whisper across millennia. When it was finally deciphered, it shocked the world. The Mycenaeans, it turned out, were Greek. The language was early Greek, written not in alphabet but in syllables. The connection to Homer, to classical Athens, to philosophy and democracy had roots deeper than anyone had known. But even as we read it, we must remember. Described did not write to be read by us. He wrote to remember, to measure, to prepare. And still his hand remains, so let us honor him. Let us close our eyes and imagine the sound of his stylus pressing into clay, the murmur of voices in the storeroom, the flicker of torchlight on amber, the faint scent of beeswax and earth. Let us hear the language not with ears, but with breath. And let us wonder, with reverence, at the lines that connect us across time, across silence, across fire. The silent language of Linnea B still speaks, but only to those who listen gently. High upon the rising slopes, carved into the earth like a forgotten song pressed into the hillside, stands a doorway tall and solemn. It is not the entrance to a palace, nor a gate to a temple. It is something more elemental, more eternal. It is a tholos tomb, circular, shadowed, still. They called it the treasury of Atreus, but it holds no coins, no jewels of currency. Its wealth lies in the quiet breath it has kept for centuries. Built around 1250 BCE, this monumental tomb is a marvel of engineering. Yet it does not shout, it waits. Approach it slowly. The Dramasta ceremonial passage guides the pilgrim inward. It is lined with great stones, perfectly placed, their faces smooth, their edges precise. This corridor, more than 20 meters long, channels not only footsteps, but anticipation. Each echo you make is doubled, swallowed, and returned. The entrance looms, over 5 meters tall, framed by monoliths that defy time, capped with a single lintel stone weighing more than a modern truck. Above it, a relieving triangle once held carvings of bronze and spiraling decoration, now gone. Yet even in absence, it speaks. Step inside. The darkness receives you like a breath withheld. A single chamber, circular, domed. The corbelled ceiling rises overhead, each stone placed so it leans slightly inward upon the next, creating a silent spiral. The chamber swells like a stone womb, vast and empty, 45 feet in diameter, 40 feet high, built with precision, without mortars, without floor. There are no murals, no statues, no inscriptions, and still it is full. This is not a place of endings. This is a place of return. The tholos tombs be hive-shaped monuments to the honored dead were the graves of kings, or perhaps those the people called kings. Their bones may have rested here in finely worked gold, their spirits launched into the dark sky like stars freed from gravity. But we do not come to name them. We come to feel. Imagine the burial, a procession in a soft morning light. Women in long robes carrying offerings, men bearing torches, their faces solemn, the body wrapped in linen, adorned in gold. Music, perhaps a flute or lyre, plays a slow lament. The air thick with smoke and myrrh. They enter the tomb, lay the dead in the earth or in stone sock. Around him they place gift cups, weapons, jewelry, jars of oil, symbols of power, symbols of passage. They sing, or weep, or fall silent, and then they leave. The entrance is sealed. The tomb closes like a sigh, and the earth remembers. The builders of these tombs were not merely masons. They were dreamers of stone. To construct a corbelled dome of such precision, such grandeur, required more than skill. It required faith that the stones would hold, that the circle would protect, that the silence would endure. And it has, for more than 3,000 years. The tholos tombs have remained. They are found across the Peloponnese at Mycenae, at Pylos, at Orchomenos. Some are modest, others immense, all faces toward the rising sun, as if even in death the kings were to awaken to light. What did the Mycenaeans believe lay beyond the tomb? Their myths did not survive in full, but perhaps they believed in a journey, a crossing, not to a place of fire, but of shadow and memory, where ancestors gather and gods walk gently, where silence is not emptiness, but presence. The tomb becomes a vessel for this journey, a threshold between what was and what may be, and what of the visitors who came later. The tombs were looted long ago. Robbers dug into the earth in the dead of night, chasing whispers of gold. They found treasures, perhaps, but they disturbed more than bones. They cracked the silence. Even so, the tombs remain sacred. Even without their contents, they pulse. Today, to enter one is to feel time slow. Children fall quiet. Footsteps hesitate. Voices soften. Inside the treasury of Atreus, if you stand perfectly still and speak, the sound circles you, climbing the dome, returning as an echo not quite your own. It is as if the stones remember every word ever spoken within them. And perhaps they do. The tomb is not about death. It is about return. Return to the earth. Return to silence. Return to a self that does not fear endings, because it remembers the beginning. And so, we leave the chamber not with sorrow, but with stillness. The sun outside is warm. The olive trees shimmer. The wind moves through the grass. The tomb behind us holds no name, no crown, no voice. And yet it holds everything. The weight of dreams. The hush of eternity. To the south of Mycenae, where the land flattens before it surrenders to the Argolic Gulf, rises another city of stone older than myth, heavier than silence, Tyrants. It does not sit upon a hill as Mycenae does. It does not wear a golden mask or speak of kings lost to epic verse. But its presence is immense, undeniable. For here are walls that defy the logic of men, Cyclopean walls. That is what the later Greeks called them, stunned by their size and strength. They believed that only the Cyclopes, giants with a single eye and a strength beyond reckoning, could have lifted such stones. And perhaps, in a way, they were right. The stones are immense, some as long as a chariot, some as heavy as memory itself. But the builders were not mythical beasts. They were human, patient, devout. They shaped a city not for display, but for endurance. Tyrants predates Mycenae. It may have watched the rise of its sister city and the fall of Crete. It may have sent ships to Troy, or listened for news of Agamemnon's fate from the returning tide. It may have offered prayers before the same gods, sung the same songs, carried the same dreams. But Tyrants chose not to shine, it chose to endure. Let us walk its walls. The fortifications of Tyrants rise over 20 feet high and nearly 20 feet thick. They twist and turn, enclosing the upper citadel like arms around a sleeping child. The stones are unshaped, unadorned, rough, yet purposeful. They fit together not with elegance but with inevitability. Between these walls, there are hidden narrow stairways, corridors that curve into darkness. Scholars call them galleries, but they feel more like veins, channels through which breath once moved. Soldiers may have watched through their slits. Children may have run their fingers along their mossy stones. Now, only the wind remains. Within the citadel lie the remains of a Megaron smaller than Mycenaeans, but just as sacred. Its hearth, too, was once the center of warmth, of speech, of offering. Around it, rooms unfold, storerooms, workshops, spaces where the pulse of life once echoed, and perhaps even a holy place. The traveler Pausanias, writing more than 1,000 years after Tyrants had fallen to ruin, passed by the site and spoke of its walls in wonder. He could not fathom how they were built, even in decay, and that is its nature, not brilliance, but presence. Mycenae captured the imagination. Tyrants held the line. It was positioned to guard the road from the sea to the heartland. Its walls, thick and unyielding, were not just for show. They were a promise, a commitment to permanence. There is a kind of humility in Tyrants. It does not demand attention. It allows itself to be discovered. Imagine the artisans who carried stones to build it. The hands calloused, the backs bent. They did not sign their names into marble. They left no portraits, no inscriptions. And yet, their work remains. The walls they built still rise, still defy. Perhaps, in the quiet of morning, they stood upon the ramparts and watched the mist roll in from the gulf. Perhaps they watched ships returning with copper and wine. Perhaps they whispered prayers as they worked, the same phrases, repeated like chants, laid between stones, like mortar. The city was active through the Bronze Age, then, like its sister cities. It declined. It was not swallowed in flame, nor buried by eruption. It faded, slowly, like a fire burning to embers. The stones did not fall, they waited. Archaeologists came much later. They dug, measured, mapped. They found pottery, tools, fragments of fresco, but they did not find a heartbeat that is not found with trowels, that is found in the wind, in the silence of the gallery passage, in the moment you touch the stone and feel it touch back. The Cyclopean walls are not a boast. They are a meditation, a memory cast in limestone, a reminder that some things are not meant to dazzle, but to endure. Tyrants does not ask to be remembered. It simply remains, and in its staying, it teaches us what strength truly is. Not violence, not noise, but stillness, wait time, and the quiet faith that someone, someday, would listen. There are stories that end in fire, in screams, in cities reduced to ash, to rubble, to legend. But the fall of the Mycenaeans was different. There was no single catastrophe, no eruption that buried their cities like Pompeii, no invader whose name has been etched across the ruins in blood. There is no record of when it truly ended, only a slow fading, a wisp. And that, perhaps, is more haunting. Around 1200 BCE, the palaces began to dim. Pylos was burned, Mycene declined, Tyrants quieted, and Linear B, so carefully pressed into clay by generations of scribes, was never written again. The Bronze Age, long and gleaming, was coming to a close, and with it, the world of the Mycenaeans, builders of palaces, makers of gold, dreamers of distant seas, slipped into silence. Why? The question has echoed through the centuries like a forgotten chord, half heard. Some speak of invaders, the sea people's shadowy figures who raided the coastlines, their origins unknown. Egyptian texts mention them, and some scholars see in them the hand that toppled empires, but there is no clear mark of their presence in Mycenae. Others point to internal strife. Perhaps the palaces who are too centralized, too fragile. A system built on hierarchy may crack when its upper tiers collapse. Scribes without grain to count, priests without oil to pour, kings without people to rule. Or was it famine? The soil, once fertile, may have withered, Crops failed, trade faltered, a drought, a blight, a change in climate. When the granaries empty, even stone walls cannot protect. Or earthquakes. Greece trembles, often a tremor here, a collapse there. One palace damaged, another left in ruins. Fear spreads faster than fault lines. People move, leave, abandon, or perhaps it was all of these woven together like a tapestry unraveling. What we do know is this. After the 12th century, the palaces were no longer rebuilt. The Linear B tablets cease. The grandeur of Mycenae faded into dust. But the people did not vanish. They lived on. They settled in smaller communities. They buried their dead in simpler graves. They passed down stories. Perhaps they even whispered the names of Agamemnon and Achilles, of gods who once walked the earth, of palaces that shimmered like firelight at dusk. It is from this long silence that the oral traditions rose. And out of that silence, centuries later, came the voice of Homer. He sang of a world already ancient in his time. He sang of bronze-clad warriors, of burning ships, of a city called Troy, not as it was, but as it had become in dream. A memory gilded by longing, a shadow wrapped in song. And so, the fall of the Mycenaeans was not a fall in the modern sense. It was not a cliff, but a slope, a slow descent into twilight, a vanishing act. And in that vanishing there is poetry, a civilization that built with stone and gold, that counted oil and grain, that sang to gods and watched the sea did not explode. It exhaled and faded, and yet it left behind its breath. The tombs, the walls, the tablets, the frescoes, fragments, but powerful ones. They do not tell us everything, but they tell us enough. Enough to feel the weight of what was lost, and the echo of what remained. Perhaps this is the nature of history, not to be fully known, but to be like the scent of myrrh in a sealed chamber, like the echo in a tholos dome, like a mask that never blinks. In the end, the Mycenaeans did not disappear. They became silence. And silence, too, has memory. It holds the weight of forgotten dreams. It whispers of a world that was not destroyed, but transformed. And in that transformation, we find ourselves not looking back in sorrow, but forward in reverence. Because what falls in silence does not fall alone. It falls into us. To speak of the Mycenaeans is to speak of bronze not merely as metal, but as mirror, as memory, as the breath of an age that carried their name. The Bronze Age, an era not of steel or iron, but of copper blended with tin, creating something harder, sharper, more enduring. A transformation of the natural into the necessary, and the Mycenaeans were masters of it. Bronze was not simply a material. It was a philosophy. It was poured, hammered, sharpened, polished. It was shaped into weapons, tools, hinges, and hooks, but also into Butamir's combs, into memory swords laid in graves, axes hung on temple walls. Into meaning, the Mycenaean smith was not merely a laborer. He was an alchemist of the known world. Copper, mined from the earth of Cyprus or local hills, was heated and folded with tin, often carried from distant lands. The fire crackled, the forge glowed, and from the coals emerged the shimmer of possibility. In the smithy, under a roof blackened with soot, sparks flew like stars. The hammer's rhythm was a heartbeat. The anvil sang its metallic chant. Men watched with reverence, for in that moment earth became power, stone became edge, flame became form. The swords they made were long and leaf-shaped. Many were ceremonial, never meant for war, but for wonder. Engraved with lions, griffins, floral spirals, the artistry was as important as the function. Some blades, found in tombs, gleamed still untouched by time. Others were bent before burial, perhaps ritually killed, as if releasing the spirit of the weapon to follow its master. Shields, too, were part of this bronze world. Though made of hide and wood, they bore bronze bosses and fittings. Helmets were adorned with boar's tusks, but their frames held bronze studs. Armor plates gleamed like dragon scales in the sunlight. Even the chariots, light, fast, deadly cladded with bronze fittings, their wheels humming across stone roads, axle spokes groaning like old trees. Horses adorned in bronze-headed tack, warriors clothed in bronze and leather, like thunder clothed in skin. And yet, bronze was not reserved for war. In homes, bronze pins fastened robes, bronze needles stitched linen, bronze knives sliced bread, opened olives, carved cheese, bronze razors shaved cheeks in morning light, bronze tweezers plucked, trimmed, refined. The artisans who made such things were respected, perhaps even revered. Their work touched every part of life from birth to burial. They inscribed their own small legacy, not in writing, but in shaping the world. And still, bronze was a symbol of connection. Its ingredients did not all come from Greece. Tin was rare in the Aegean. It had to be traded, sought, acquired through distant routes. The very existence of bronze in Mycenaean hands is proof of networks of relationships that stretched across seas and sands. When those networks faltered, so too did the bronze, and the world that depended on it. By the time the Mycenaean palaces fell, bronze had begun to fade from dominant. Iron, once rare, began to appear rough, uncertain, but cheaper. It did not gleam the way bronze did. It did not flow the same in fire, but it endured. The age of bronze yielded to the age of iron, as all things yield to time, and yet bronze remains the soul of the Mycenaeans. Even now it shimmers in museums and tombs, in the blades buried beside kings, in the mirror once held by a girl whose name we'll never know. It reflects not just faces, but the past. The Mycenaean bronze is not just metal, it is memory. Memory of hands that shaped, of wars that passed, of beauty once forged in flame. And so, when we gaze into the curve of a Mycenaean dagger, or trace the inlay of a bronze sword, we are not seeing a weapon. We are seeing a whisper of the age that bore its name. A whisper that says, we were here, we shaped, we remembered, let us remember with them. Let us walk again through the forges. Let us hear the clang of hammer on anvil. Let us breathe the smoke, the sweat, the spark. Let us feel what they felt. Not just the weight of the blade, but the fire becoming. In the great palaces of Mycenaean, amidst the halls of kings and the storerooms of scribes, there were other spaces quieter, more rhythmic, more enduring. Spaces filled, not with warriors, but with women. Not with bronze, but with thread. To understand the Mycenaean world fully, one must follow the thread back not just to the looms, but to the hands that moved upon them. Hands that shaped not only fabric, but a civilization's soul. For the Mycenaean women were not idle figures behind stone walls. They were makers, organizers, guardians of life's continuity. In the tablets of Linear B, they appear again and again, listed by name, by role, by labor. Some were called weavers, others grinders, bakers, spinners, nurses. Some were marked as free, others as temple servants. Still others belonged to the palace. Their identities are not always clear, but their presence is undeniable. Their world was not quiet. The loom creaked with rhythm. The shuttle whispered across the warp. The beaters clapped with certainty. Weaving was not just labor. It was sacred. It was storytelling. The act of taking threads fine and fragile and turning them into cloth was alchemy of the everyday. Linen spun from flax grown in nearby fields. Wool dyed with herbs and earth. The colors were not only decoration but meaning. Some cloths were simple, worn daily, passed from mother to daughter. Others were ceremonial, shimmering with patterns too complex for words. These were offerings to the gods, robes for priestesses, shrouds for the honored dead. Even the great bull-jumping scenes of which the Mycenaeans admired and emulated, show women not as passive observers, but as central figures poised, balanced, courageous. In one fresco, 3 women stand in profile, one holding a gift, another raising her arms, a third adorned in spiral earrings and bracelets. Their gazes are calm, their presence firm. They are not symbols, they are memory made flesh. And perhaps the myths themselves remember, in later Greek tradition, the fates, those who spin the thread of life, measure it, and cut it, are women, the goddesses of wisdom, of agriculture, of hearth, all feminine. The loom, the spindle, the distaff, these are not merely tools. They are emblems of cosmic control. And who controlled them? The women of Mycenaean. Their labor was invisible to the chroniclers of war, but not to the gods. In the palatial centers, entire quarters were likely devoted to textile production. Workshops filled with spindles, baskets of carded wool, loom stole and vertical. The process was communal, generational, meditative. Each thread passed from hand to hand was more than fiber. It was a line back to origin. They sang, perhaps. They told stories. They remembered names. They taught daughters, comforted sons, buried their elders, and then began again. Even their presence in religion is suggested. Tablets mention offerings to goddesses, service in sanctuaries. Women likely danced in festivals, bore torches in night rites, prepared sacred bread. They wove not just cloth, but continuity. In death too, their work remained. In shaft graves, women were buried with beads, combs, and cloth, with mirrors of polished bronze, with necklaces shaped like lilies, and earrings that still shine. Their stories are half lost, but their hands endure. Each preserved textile fragment is a breath of their world. Each spindle weight found in soil is a footstep left behind. Their names, sometimes written, often erased, flutter through time like ribbons in wind. Irita, Portanaya, Mira, Dawara, War. They priestesses, weavers, mothers, all 3. We may never know, but they were, and they mattered. The Mycenaean woman, so often unseen in epic or inscription, stands at the center of the home, the temple, the loom. She is not myth, she is memory. And as we sleep, wrapped in cloth, lulled by rhythm, softened by silence, let us honor her. Let us hear the loom song once more. The gentle hush of spindle turning, the beat of warp and weft, the sigh of wool combed smooth, and the voice, faint but steady, of a woman weaving sky into fabric, thread into time. She is there still. At the loom, at the fire, in the stone. The woman who wove the Mycenaean world does not ask to be seen. She asks only to be felt. Beneath the surface of stone walls and golden masks, beyond the reach of tablets and ledgers, the Mycenaean world whispered in symbols, spirals, rosettes, double axes, griffins with curling wings, dolphins leaping in eternal arcs. These were not mere decorations. They were the vocabulary of the unseen, the language of belief, of power, of prayer. We find them carved into ivory, painted on pottery, etched into walls, now lost to time. They cluster on seal stones, glint on jewelry, wrap around the rims of drinking vessels. And though we cannot read them as we would words, we can feel them. They speak not to the mind, but to the breath. The spiral appears again and again, endless, winding, coiling inward. It is not a path, it is a rhythm. Some say it symbolizes eternity. Others say it mirrors the journey inward, the return to source. In Mycenaean art, it is placed where thought gathers at the edge of shields, at the base of columns, inside tombs. It is the shape of time, unending. The rosetta flower with perfect symmetry blooms from wall paintings and cup rims. It is delicate yet precise. Perhaps it spoke of renewal, of fertility, of the sacred geometry of life. The Mycenaeans did not write poetry in verses they let the rosette bloom where words would fade. Then comes the double-axed labyrinth, symbol of power and perhaps of the divine feminine. In Minoan Crete, it was carved deep into the walls of The Mycenaeans inherited it, honored it, and repeated it in their own sacred spaces, not as a weapon, but as a sign. It cuts not flesh, but silence. Lions walk across seal stones, their bodies taut with strength, but they are not snarling. They are not beasts of chaos. They are symbols of protection, of kingship, of alertness. In the lion gate, the creatures do not face outward. They do not threaten. They face inward, as if guarding a mystery. Griffins to flutter at the edges of fresque. Creatures of myth, part eagle, part lion. They stand beside thrones, as if watching over something too sacred to name. They are not real and yet. They are present. Birds to fill the space between the known and the unknown. Painted in pairs, perched on branches, or flying across borders. They may have symbolized the soul, or a message, or the threshold between earth and sky. The Mycenaeans spoke through these forms. When the written language was limited to records and numbers, art became expression. Gesture became grammar. And the most sacred of all, red, the color of blood, of fire, of vitality, used for borders, for life force, for warning. Blue, drawn from rare minerals, evoked sky, sea, and serenity. Gold, of course, was the language of eternity. Each wall painting was a sentence, each design a word. In the palace at Pylos, a fresco shows a woman pouring libation at a shrine. Above her, symbols, hoverflowers, birds, flowing shapes. There is no caption, yet the scene is clear. A sacred moment, framed in softness and stillness. In Mycenae, fragments of wall show warriors, but not in war. They stand, they wait. Around them, spiral forms rise like thoughts. The language of action is paused, wrapped in the language of symbol. Even in the simplest of vessel sculpts, shaped like lotus flowers, bowls etched with waves of art, whispers. This was not a world that needed narrative. It lived in presence, in metaphor and form. As modern eyes, we look and ask, what does it mean? But perhaps the better question is, what does it feel? To see the spiral is to feel time stretch. To see the lion is to feel safety. To see the bird is to feel passage. They did not teach these symbols in schools. They lived them, breathed them, placed them where memory gathered, on tombs, on walls, on altars. In this way, the Mycenaean world remains open. It does not close around us, it invites us in, not with commands, but with signs. The way a shoreline invites a boat, the way a breeze invites a thought. We follow these symbols, not because we understand them, but because we remember them. We remember that once, before alphabets ruled, before history had dates, there was a world shaped by shape. And in that world, silence spoke in spirals, and prayer wore the form of a flower. Let us see as they saw. Let us feel as they felt. Let us walk into the dream not with explanation, but with wonder. Beneath the grand stories of kings and queens, of battles and gods, there lived the Menethos whose names have not survived, yet whose presence shaped the Mycenaean world, as surely as stone shapes shadow of farmers. The shepherds, the bakers, the children, especially the children. They did not write, they did not rule, they did not sail or forge bronze. And yet, through their eyes, the Mycenaean world breathed with immediacy, with wonder. Imagine a small village nestled along the lower slopes beneath Mycenae's heights. A cluster of clay-plastered homes, roofed with thatch, their walls warm in the golden light of afternoon. Goats wander nearby, chickens flutter through the dust. A dog sleeps in the shade of a fig tree, and among the stones, barefoot children chase one another, laughing. They carry no scrolls. They do not wear gold. Their clothes are simple woven linen dyed with the browns and yellows of the earth. Their lives are not written in linear B, but they are lived fully. One child kneels beside a stream, sending a reed boat drifting between pebbles. Another traces spirals in the soil with a stick. A third cradles a small clay figurine, shaped by a mother's hand. The figurine has a wide face, open arms, and painted dots for eyes. It is not a toy only. It is memory. Children in the Mycenaean world were close to nature. They touched the soil, climbed the hills, tasted the fruit directly from vine and branch. They were close to death. Too many did not survive into adulthood, but while they lived beside mystery. Perhaps they heard myths told not by poets, but by grandparents seated near the stories of lions who guarded gates, of gods who sent wind and fire, of heroes who sailed to islands that vanished in mist. These tales were not distant. They were here, now alive. At festivals, children might have worn flower crowns, danced in circles, mimicked their elders. They watched as oil was poured for the gods. They helped grind grain between stones, their arms learning rhythm. Their laughter mingled with birdsong and the hum of bees. They may have known no kings, no tablets, no bronze, but they knew the seasons. They knew the call of the owl at dusk, the shape of a fig tree in winter, the silence that fell before the rain. We find their traces rarely. Tiny footprints in the hardened earth, small burial jars beneath floors, a doll carved from ivory, a toy cart with wheels still intact. They remind us that this grand civilization was not all palace and war. It was also lullabies, and lullabies are history too. In the shaft graves, some children were buried with care with beads, combs, even weapons too large for their hands, not because they had used them, but because the people believed they still might need protection. In another place, to the Mycenaeans' death was a continuation, not a severance, and the children, even in loss, were wrapped in memory. They are with us now, in the hush of the olive groves, in the soft clay beneath our feet, in the shape of the hills that cradled the ruins. Let us not forget them. The children who sang while others tallied grain, who danced while scribes recorded gods, who dreamed not of glory, but of simple things, warmth, play, love. They are not in the tablets, but they are in the silence between lines. They did not build the palace, but they built the world. As the sun slipped beyond the western ridges, the Mycenaean world did not fall into darkness. It entered its other half. Night to the Mycenaeans was not the absence of light. It was a living presence, a time when the known softened and the invisible breathed louder. The hearth was lit. The doors were barred. The wind carried other voices. They had no electric flame, no hum of machines. Their nights were primal. The stars did not shimmer above them, they consumed the sky. The moon was not decoration, it was a clock, a sentinel, a goddess. And so, as day ended, the Mycenaeans entered a sacred threshold. The palace grew hushed. The workshops stilled. The last rays of light slipped across the stone floors, painting them gold, then ash. Outside, the fields exhaled. The goats bleated low. A child was called home. In the megaron, the fire was stoked again, its embers pushed upward, flickering against painted walls. Shadows danced, serpents, birds, men with curved swords or reflections of the day now retreating. Night was not feared, it was revered, for it was the time when the gods walked more freely, when dreams swelled like tides, when messages came through symbols, and sleep opened the gate to memory. The Mycenaeans did not separate waking from dreaming with sharp lines. The one bled into the other. A dream was not just imagination, it was omen, insight, vision. A visit from an ancestor, a warning from a deity, a glimpse into what lay behind the veil. And so, they respected night. The oil lamp became the center of being. Its glow drew the family inward. Women worked by its light, spinning or weaving, their hands moving while their minds wandered. Children lay near, eyes wide, listening. Stories filled the dark. Stories of Perseus, slayer of monsters and founder of Mycenae. Stories of lions that guarded kings. Stories of maidens who turned into birds, and men who became stars. Outside, the moon passed silently overhead. The constellations turned in their eternal rhythm. Orion, the Pleiades, Cassiopeia, the same stars we know now. The same map, guiding those who watched. Some nights were filled with festivals, flames reflected in goblets, songs carried on the wind, offerings burned, their smoke curling toward the heavens like questions. But most nights were ordinary, and in their ordinariness they became profound. In the village homes, a clay lamp burned low. A mother smoothed a blanket over her child. A dog stirred, then settled. A voice hummed a lullaby. No one wrote down these moments, yet they were the threads of life. And what of fear? It lived. Yes, in the rustle of leaves, in the furrow of howl, in the silence that came too quickly. But it was woven into faith. A charm hung near the door. A symbol scratched into wood. A name whispered into the dark, not to summon but to protect. The gods did not sleep. They watched. They wandered. They listened, and the people knew that night was part of the balance. Without it, there could be no dawn. We modern ones often rush to light. We push back the dark with electricity, with noise. But the Mycenaeans embraced it. They wrapped themselves in it. They made peace with it. And perhaps that is why their memory endures, not because they conquered the night, but because they walked with it. So tonight, as you listen, as the world around you dims, feel their presence. Feel the hush that falls after the fire dies. Feel the stars above, unchanged. Feel the dreams that rise like mist from the earth. The night has no end, only transformation. And in its quiet, the Mycenaeans wait, not with fear, but with knowing. There is a silence more ancient than language, a hush that lies not in the sky, nor in the sea, but beneath our feet. The Mycenaeans knew it. They felt it with every stone they laid, every grave they sealed, every offering they buried with reverence and rhythm. For beneath the palaces, beneath the roads and fields and walls, they built sanctuaries not for the living but for memory, for meaning, for the sacred breath of the earth itself. Cisterns, wells, tombs, places where one descends, not simply to retrieve water or bury bone, but to listen. At Mycenae, beneath the southern wall of the citadel, a secret stairway descends into darkness, cut deep into the rock, its walls closed in. The air grows damp, the light fades. The stone steps, worn by time, seem less like human construction and more like a vein cut into the body of the earth. At the bottom, there once lay a vital source of water in times of siege. A lifeline, but it is more than that. It is a descent into the unseen. This descent, carved by hands long returned to dust, mirrors the deeper descent the Mycenaeans made again and again into the realm of the dead. For they did not fear the underworld. They walked toward it with ritual. They brought gifts. They spoke names. They whispered through soil, believing the roots of trees carried messages as surely as rivers carried boats. Their graves were not simply burial plots. They were places of meeting. In shaft graves, they laid their beloved with grace wrapped in linen, surrounded by gold, by weapons, by cups and mirrors and hope. Some were buried in tholos tombs, great beehives of stone, their entrances aligned with the east. Others lay in simpler pits, the earth itself as coffin. It was a keeper, a listener. And so they buried not in fear, but in trust. They believed the ancestors listened, that the world beneath pulsed with presence, that death was a continuation not of form, but of essence. Even their offerings to the gods often found their way into the soil. Shards of painted vessels, crumbs of bread, drops of oil, buried, given, not lost. They knew the earth remembers, and we, too, must remember. Today, archaeologists unearth these fragments, like archaeologists of the soul. Each dig is an invocation, each brushstroke across clay a rediscovery, each step into a subterranean chamber, a return. We find rings etched with tiny spirals, ivory combs, inscriptions too faint to read, the occasional skull jaws forever open, as though still telling a story. But the greatest story is in the silence, in the cool hush of the city, in the lingering scent of damp stone, in the knowledge that deep below, the Mycenaeans placed their trust, and it held. Beneath our feet lie the echoes of prayers no longer spoken, the footfalls of children who no longer run, the breath of songs never written. But they are not gone, they sleep in the earth, and the earth remembers. So next time you stand upon soil, pause, listen. There is history beneath you, not in books, not in ruins, but in the breathless hush of the Mycenaeans are there still. Among the ruins of Mycenae, beyond the tombs and fading frescoes, one name still stirs more than any other. A name whispered across centuries, a name that lives somewhere between history and myth. Agamemnon. His is not just a name etched on a tablet or carved on a stone. His is a presence that haunts the hills, a shadow that does not pass with the setting sun, a figure more spirit than man, the King of Kings, the Lord of Men, the one who led 1,000 ships to war, who sacrificed his daughter to summon the wind, who clashed with Achilles, who returned in triumph and met death at the hands of his queen. But who was he? Was he real? Was there ever an Agamemnon? The archaeologists searched for him in shafts and chambers, in the golden mask lifted from the tomb, in the fragments of a cup, in the ash of a hearth. They seek the man. But the Mycenaeans have left only pieces. What remains is not certainty. What remains is a mystery. In the Homeric epics, written long after the fall of Mycenae, Agamemnon strides across the pages like a giant, proud, harsh, tragic. He is not a hero in the easy sense. He is flawed. He is wounded. He commands, but he does not inspire love. He is followed, but not adored. And perhaps that is why he lingers, because in him, the poets wove the ache of power, the weight of responsibility, the terrible cost of war. In the halls of Mycenae, where the Megaron once glowed with fire, we can imagine him seated upon a throne that bore not luxury, but burden. Perhaps he stared into the hearth too long, wondering if the gods listened at all. Perhaps he carried not just a sword, but regret. Or perhaps he was never there. Perhaps Agamemnon is a mask the Mycenaeans left behind, a myth carved to explain the weight of ruins, a name forged to fill the silence, a figure to bind together the broken songs of a civilization's twilight. But even if he never walked these stones, Agamemnon has never left. His name was spoken by Schliemann, the excavator who dreamed more than he proved. The golden mask he lifted from the shaft grave, he called the Mask of Agamemnon, but the timeline was wrong. The grave too old, the features too calm. Still, the name stuck, because Agamemnon is not only a man, he is an idea. He is the memory of kingship, magnified by myth. He is the echo of what it means to lead, to fail, to return, and to be betrayed. And so, when we wander the ruins, we do not ask if Agamemnon was real. We ask why we remember him. We ask what it means to wear a crown, when the weight of it cannot protect against the blade waiting in the dark. We ask what it means to be remembered not as you were, but as you are. In this, Agamemnon joins other timeless kings: Arthur of Britain, Gilgamesh of Uruk, Minos of Crete, rulers whose stories are more than history. They are reflection. They are caution. They are longing for someone to lead, for someone to suffer, for someone to return. So let the gold mask gleam. Let the tholos tomb stand. Let the name be whispered once more in the halls of broken stone. Agamemnon never died, because he never truly lived. And yet, he lives still, in the hush of in the light that falls on shattered thresholds, in the breath we draw as we ask not with voice, but with soul. Who was he, and who are we, to remember him? Long before the ink of Homer dried upon papyrus, long before the bard's voice carved epics into memory, there were other songs. They were not written. They were breathed, carried on the wind across the hills of Argos, whispered by the shepherd at dusk, hummed by the mother at the hearth. They had no single author, no perfect meter, no grand structure, but there were songs nonetheless, the songs of the might. For every civilization sings, even when it has no letters for poetry, even when its voices are lost. The Mycenaeans left us no Iliad, no Odyssey. Their tablets speak only of inventories. Their palaces are silent, and yet, through pottery, burial rites, and fragments of fresco, we feel it an oral tradition that lived and moved and evolved. Stories passed from mouth to mouth, rhythms remembered not on parchment, but in footstep and breath. It was a world where language was alive, not fixed in stone, but floating. And so we imagine, perhaps a traveler came to a village, bearing not goods, but tales of a warrior who faced 100 men and returned unharmed, of a woman who spoke to birds and read the sky, of a king whose crown could not save him from sorrow. They would gather around him, children, wide-eyed elders nodding slowly. The fire crackled, the night rose, and the story was told, again and again, until it became more than story. It became song. These songs were not distractions. They were maps. They told how to live, how to die, how to pray, how to hope, and they changed, always. For memory is not fixed, it flows. Each singer added, removed, transformed, the names shifted, the places blurred, but the soul remained. And centuries later, Homer roared, those who carried his name caught that song, like rain in a vessel, like wind in a sail. He did not invent Agamemnon or Achilles. He inherited them. The Mycenaean epics were not composed in quiet study. They were shouted on hilltops, sung in marketplaces, whispered in tombs, and behind them, we hear even older voice, Minoans of Crete, the Anatolians of Troy, the islanders of Cyprus, cultures interwoven, their stories mingling like smoke in the sky. The Mycenaean bard, whoever he was, carried a lyre or sat beside a drum. His feet beat the earth in rhythm, his hands carved gesture from heaven. He sang of the gods, yes, but also of sheep lost in the mountains, of lovers who waited by the sea, of floods, of droughts, of stars. He sang for survival. He sang because silence was heavier than death. And what of the listeners? They did not memorize. They remembered, not through rote, but through repetition, through ritual, through rhythm. A boy heard the story of the lion hunt 50 times before he understood its ending. A girl sang the same hymn to Patnia each spring, her voice cracking as she grew. And through this, the culture endured. Even as palaces burned, even as tablets turned to dust, even as names were forgotten, the song remained. It was buried in the ground, wrapped in echo, until one day, it was reborn. Homer sang it, and now so do we. Every time we speak of every time we walk through the Lion Gate, every time we remember a world that left us no books but many voices. The Mycenaeans did not write their epics, they became them. Let us listen once more, not to the words on the page, but to the silence between them. That is where the first songs still live. They rise at the edges of the Mycenaean world, not as barriers, but as witnesses. The mountains, tall, weathered, unyielding, silent, but not without voice. To the Mycenaeans, they were not simply formations of stone. They were gods, guardians. They breathed. They watched. Every palace, every village, every tomb was built in conversation with them. The citadel of Mycenae itself was cradled by the mountains. its back to the heights, its face toward the Argive plain. It was not random, it was reverent. The mountains offered more than protection, they offered presence. To climb their slopes was to ascend into the realm of the divine. The ancient peaks Artemision, Parthenian have long since lost their shrines and altars, their cairns and wooden markers, but they have not lost their memory. In the wind that howls through the path, in the echo of goat bells along their trails, in the hush that falls just before snow, the Mycenaeans understood these places. They've built shrines not only in their cities but upon the summits. Evidence of peak sanctuaries suggests ritual offerings of clay, libations poured onto bare rock, incense rising like breath to the sky. Why the mountains? Because from there, the gods could see. From there, one could touch the edge of heaven. From there, the concerns of the valley grew small and still. Imagine a processionman, women, children ascending in the early morning, their feet steady upon worn paths. They carry baskets of fruit, jugs of wine, coils of woven flowers. Their songs are low. The higher they climb, the quieter they become. At the summit, an altar, simple, stone, no grandeur, no walls, just sky. They kneel, they place their gifts, they speak the names of their dead, their fears, their hopes, no priest required, only wind, only presence. From such heights, one sees the world not as divided, but whole. Sea, plain, forest, road, all connected by the sky's unblinking gaze. To the Mycenaeans, the mountains were more than geography, they were thresholds. Between this world and the next, between earth and ether, between body and breath. Even myths honor this belief. Later tales tell of Zeus born on a mountain, of gods who descended to speak with mortals atop high places. These are not inventions, they are echoes. Perhaps the mountains spoke back. In rockfalls and thunder, in dreams. The builders of Mycene chose their land with care. They placed their citadels where stone and sky embraced. They raised their walls not against the mountains but in harmony with them. And so, long after the last palace faded, the mountains remained. Watching, waning, the shepherds still climbed them. The mists still gather, the stars still wheel overhead, and the Mycenaean paths are still there narrow, forgotten, but real. Beneath the pine needles, beneath the moss, beneath the centuries. They are not roads of empire. They are trails of prayer. We may walk them again if we walk slowly, if we listen, if we breathe. Let the mountains speak. Let their silence wash over us. And let us remember, the Mycenaeans built high, but the highest things they knew were not walls. They were the peaks that watched and waited. It began before memory, before stone, before the first mask was hammered from gold, before the first tablet was pressed in clay. Fire. At the center of every Mycenaean home, every palace, every soul burned. It was not a convenience, it was the heart, the living pulse of stone walls and human breath. To understand the Mycenaean world, you must sit beside its fire. In the Megaron, where the roof opened to the heavens and columns rose around the central hearth, the flame was not mere warmth. It was offering, it was continuity, it was conversation between realms. Smoke drifted upward not just into air, but into spirit. The fire was tended constantly. Day and night. When kings slept, it burned. When children cried, it burned. When strangers arrived, it welcomed. When ancestors were remembered, it answered. It was not allowed to die, because when fire dies, something greater fades. There is evidence blackened stones, ash layers, scorched beams that Mycenaean life revolved around it. Cooking.
Yes.
But also worship, oaths, sacrifice, meditation. And there were other fires, too. In the workshops where bronze was poured and shaped, flames roared hotter still, controlled by artisans with steady breath and calloused hands. In the kilns of potters, flames spun bowls into beauty. In the shrines, small fires flickered where oil met wick. Each flame was different. Each flame was the same. Even in death, the fire continued. In burial rituals, offerings were burned, perhaps the body, too, in some cases, though most were interred. But always, the fire was near. It guided, it warmed, it transmuted. The goddess Hestia, later named by the Greeks, may find her roots here in the nameless reverence the Mycenaeans showed to flame. She who is the hearth, she who is center, and what of fire in war? The flames that consumed the palaces at the Empylos, Mycenaean Thebes, they were not sacred, they were rupture. But even in their destruction, they revealed something hidden. The clay tablets, baked unintentionally by these final fires, survived because of them. Destruction became preservation. Loss became record. The flames that devoured also delivered. And in that paradox, we glimpsed the strange poetry of the Bronze Age's end. Perhaps the fire in the Megaron, the one that had burned for centuries, had already gone out by then. Perhaps the hearth was cold when the enemy arrived. Or perhaps it still burned, defiant, glowing, even as stone cracked and beams fell. We will never know. But we can imagine, we can sit in the dark, eyes closed, and feel its warmth again. In the mind's eye, the flame still dances. still whispers, still gathers voices around it, mothers telling stories, old men remembering harvests, children tracing spirals in ash. It is there still, not in the ruins, not in the ashes, but in us. Because we remember the fire, we remember what it meant, and in remembering we rekindle. So let us gather once more. Let the hearth burn, let silence grow warm, let history take its seat beside the flame, and let the night stretch long and still, lit not by brilliance, but by the quiet glow of memory. The fire never went out. Not really. The Mycenaeans are gone. Their cities are broken. Their palaces quiet. Their songs unrecorded. Their faces turned forever toward the earth. And yet they dream, not as ghosts, not as echoes, but as presences that stir softly in the folds of stone, in the breath of olive groves, in the long silence before dawn. They do not speak in words. They speak in weight, in absence, in shape, in rhythm, and what they say is not history. It is memory, the kind of memory that dreams. It is not the memory of facts, of dates, of ledgers etched into clay. It is the deeper kind of memory that lives in the body, in the soil, in the wind that passes through doorways, no longer there. What do they remember? Not glory, not conquest, but rhythm. The rhythm of harvest and offering, of loom and spindle, of flame and breath, of arrival and loss. And we, standing centuries away, do not observe them from a distance. We participate. We carry their dreams without knowing it. In the stories we tell, in the homes we build, in the fire we light when the night comes too soon. Because all civilizations dream, and some dream so deeply that even after the walls fall, the dream remains. The Mycenaean dream is not one of dominance. It is not a shout. It is not the clang of sword on shield. It is quieter, more enduring. It is the dream of building with stones so heavy, so precise, that it lasts beyond language. It is the dream of offering honey to a god whose name will be forgotten, simply because the act is beautiful. It is the dream of shaping a cup not only to drink from, but to hold in both hands, feeling its curve echo the sky. It is the dream of burying the dead not to forget, but to continue. And that dream lives on. It lives in every spiral pattern that makes us pause, in every ruin that calls us to silence, in every night when we stare into a fire and feel the weight of something we cannot name. The Mycenaeans no longer build, but we build because of them. They no longer speak, but we speak with their breath. They no longer dream, but we dream what they began. So let us return, one last time, through the lion gate. Let us walk past the grave circles and feel the hush. Let us climb to the megaron and sit where the fire once danced. Let us close our eyes and listen to the wind that stirs the dust, to the memory that does not forget, to the dream that does not end, because some stories do not need telling, they need remembering. And some civilizations never fall, they simply become part of us forever. And now, dear dreamer, the fires of Mycene dim once more. The halls grow quiet, the lions above the gate sleep again in shadow, and the stones that bore witness to kings, to weavers, to sailors and scribes, return to silence. You have walked among their ruins not as an observer, but as a guest. You have passed beneath the lintels where gods were once named in whisper, stood beneath the painted ceilings where myths were born in brush, and wandered down the stairways where water once waded in the hush of stone. Let it all settle now. Let the rhythm of their breath become your own. Inhale, like the wind over the Argive hills. Exhale, like the smoke from the hearths of the You carry their memory now, not in fact, but in feeling, not in knowledge, but in wonder. The Mycenaeans are no longer gone, they drift within you. If these ancient whispers have stirred something gentle in your soul, if the silence of Mycenae has wrapped around you like twilight mist, then let your presence be known through a soft touch of gratitude, like a quiet echo of your visit. And if your spirit yearns to wander again through time's veiled paths, to rest beside ancient firelight and walk among the dreams of the forgotten, then join us. Become one of our circle. A dreamer of the past, a listener to silence. Subscribe, not to a channel but to a rhythm, to a pilgrimage of breath and shadow and memory. And as you drift now into sleep, tell us, gently, from where you dream, what hills cradle your night, what stars mark your passage. Let the dreamers gather across oceans and time zones, woven by the hush of ancient roads and soft midnight winds. Good night, traveler. The Mycenaeans sleep again. And now, so may you let the dark carry you gently. Let the past hold you softly, until we dream again.